Alright, so we're going to do some spaghetti squash today. And I have already done my spaghetti squash, but I will show you what it's supposed to look like when it comes out of the oven. And I will show you, or tell you, what I did to it. So, these are semi-small spaghetti squash. Usually for about 2 to 4 people, you need one large one, but these are fairly small, like you can hold it in 2 hands. That's small for a spaghetti squash. The bigger ones would be about twice that size. So what I did, you can see it steaming because it just came out of the oven. I put some olive oil in the cavity after I removed the seeds inside and cut it in half. I put some olive oil in there, Italian seasoning, garlic powder, onion powder, pepper, and anything else that you think would go with your dish. So for this instance, I'm going to be making it like a chicken Alfredo kind of thing, and I'll show you how I wing my Alfredo sauce. So again, this is a wing it type of deal, but this is how I do it. So when you've put olive oil and your seasonings in there and you've rubbed the whole squash down, you're going to put it upside down on a parchment sheet in the oven. I had mine on 350 for about almost an hour. You want them to get really soft. So all you're going to have to do is when you start smelling the squash, you can take it out of the oven and see if you can move the inside around like this with very little pressure with a fork, and it should come out kind of stringy like this. That's how you know your spaghetti squash is done. What I have done is I'm putting mine over a strainer and a bowl while I make the Alfredo sauce, because it does tend to release a lot of water after it's been in the oven. So that's the prep work we're doing for the spaghetti squash so far. Really the hardest part about prepping the spaghetti squash is cutting them in half. They do tend to be harder. I have seen a few suggested comments on other videos before of microwaving the squash for a few minutes, like maybe 5 minutes or so, and then cutting it. But honestly, I just keep forgetting about that step. So I just cut them raw, season them, massage them really well, and put them upside down in the oven. So I just wait till I smell it and wait till it's soft, and that's done for me. And I'm gonna let this chill over a strainer and release that moisture, and then I'll mix up all the seasonings and oil in it after I'm done with my Alfredo sauce, and I'll bring you back for that part. Okay, so this is a 2-quart saucepan that I have heating on the stove right now, and I put about 2 cups of heavy cream in there. And so what I do while it's heating up is I just throw in any flavors or seasonings that I think will complement it. So since we're doing a chicken Alfredo type deal, I'll put garlic powder in there, and I just throw it on the top until it's the first layer's covered. It looks like this. I'm going to do the onion powder, and I do the same thing. I just cover the top layer with seasoning. And then I'll do the same thing with Italian seasoning. I try to make my Alfredo sauces pretty flavorful, and I do taste as I go. So if you want estimated measurements, I would say each seasoning I'm doing is about 1.5 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons, around there. It's a lot. I mean, I'm covering the whole top of it. It could be a teaspoon, honestly. This is what I was talking about when I eyeball stuff. And I'll do the same thing with the Lowry seasoning salt. Not too much salt because I plan on adding feta cheese at the end. I'm also going to add fresh basil into it the last minute of cooking, and then I'm going to cut up some small cherry tomatoes to add to the pasta. So this is the type of thing when I build a meal and make stuff from scratch just because I feel like it. It's basically what I'm feeling in the moment. So again, just to repeat, this is 2 cups of heavy cream. This is a 2-quart saucepan, and I just cover the top layer with seasoning. Let that come to a boil until it starts to get thick, and then I'll taste it and see where it's at, and then I'll go from there. So I'll come back for that. Okay, you're looking for a boil like this, but you have to keep stirring it continuously at this point. You can't let it burn on the bottom. Try to use as good of a boiler as you have, or saucepan, I guess you would call it sometimes, without any scratches or scrapes on the bottoms, if you can help it. Now, I know not all of us have that because this is my stepmom's saucepan, and all mine in the past have been used for 10 years, so I completely understand. I did go ahead and cut up some cubed pieces of chicken that we had left over because my dad actually smoked some chicken. You can do a rotisserie chicken here, or if you need to, you know, a couple hours before this, you can go ahead and roast the chicken in the oven to break down. I do suggest saving the bones and any scrap vegetable pieces you use at all in a Ziploc bag in the freezer to make a chicken broth later for things such as just chicken broth or for chicken and dumplings. It always has a more homey flavor. So we've cubed up the chicken. I added some shredded pepper jack, about 1/4 of a cup. I've added 1/4 of this round of boursin cheese. If you want some mushrooms in here, you can add mushrooms, any kind of vegetables you like. And now that it's at this boiling stage, if you want to just leave it here and you've tasted it and you like it, that's fine. If you want to be any thicker and the other cheeses aren't doing it, you can add a cornstarch slurry. I do prefer it a little thicker. So what I do is I make a slurry, which means that you do 1 teaspoon of cornstarch and 2 teaspoons of water. So whatever amount of cornstarch you put in there, a teaspoon, tablespoon, you would double that in water and make sure it's completely mixed together before you add it to a sauce. It needs to be a liquid before you add it to a sauce. Otherwise, you run the risk of it clumping. It doesn't always clump when it's in its powder form, but it has been known to, especially when I tried it before. I didn't know for the longest time what a cornstarch slurry was, so now you know if you didn't. So I'm just going to get that mixed in until it's a thickness that I like. And I did already taste it. It's really good here. I love the flavor of this. You can add shredded Parmesan, shredded mozzarella, any kind of cheese that you prefer. You can also just season heavy cream, and it's fine like that. It's an Alfredo sauce. You're good. It doesn't have to have a whole bunch of stuff added. I do like to add stuff when I have it, but you do not have to. So we're going to remove this from the heat because that's pretty thick. Sorry, you can't see over this thing, but it's pretty thick in its liquid form, so it's going to be thicker than that when it's cooled off. So I'm going to remove that from the saucepan, and I'm going to go ahead and add the basil here so that when it wilts a little bit, it lends some of the fresh flavor without killing the basil completely. And then I'm going to cut up a few cherry tomatoes, and I will come back with the finished product. By the way, I did want to show you this. This is the bowl that the spaghetti squash was straining over. That's how much liquid it releases. That's about 1/2 cup of liquid. You can also freeze and save this for a broth in the future. Squash is really, really good in broths, and I do highly recommend that. That's what I'm going to do. You can add that to your broth stash. So I've gotten my spaghetti squash noodles pretty dry. Like there's not any liquid straining from there. And at this point, now that it's strained completely, is when I would add my sauce. I added the basil and the tomatoes, so I'm just going to pour that right over. And I'm going to mix it up really well. Now, when you want to add vegetables, like roasted asparagus in the oven, some cauliflower, broccoli, anything your heart desires, bread, you can do that. It doesn't all have to be healthy, but spaghetti squash does have more vitamins than traditional pasta. So you can think of it from that standpoint. I did chop up the tomatoes, like I said. I did add the basil. And also another thing you can add to your Alfredo sauce to give it a better flavor is a teaspoon of chicken bouillon, a bouillon cube, or chicken broth. Chicken broth will take longer to get the liquid out. But here's the finished product. Look at that. Sorry. There you go. Very nice. Y'all have a good day and treat yourself well.